think you have to allow for some prior individuation. In reality, it just might not have anything like a resemblance with the things that we experience.
You can't just have the world enter your head directly without being filtered by your own needs and interests as a creature.
The sensory systems of any creature, human or otherwise, the structures of the perception will never reflect the true structures of objective reality.
My name is David Malone, and this is the survival paradox. We've always felt we're working towards a true account of the universe and the world we see around us, and that it's an accurate picture of reality. Or so most of us believe. At the same time, we think we and how we experience things are a product of evolution. Yet evolution is driven by survival, not truth. Some scientists go further and argue that evolution rules out even the possibility that we experience an accurate and true account of reality. So should we conclude that while our biology enables us to successfully function in the world, our experiences and theories are just useful illusions rather than truths? Is the theory of evolution itself flawed, unable even to account for the truth of the theory itself? Or can we fashion a new account of ourselves that would give us a better way to understand both who we are, the process of evolution, and our relationship to reality? To help us untangle all of that, we have three fabulous speakers. Donald Hoffman, an American cognitive psychologist, Mazviita Chirimuuta, a senior lecturer in philosophy at Edinburgh University. And lastly, we have Graham Harman, a key figure in the philosophical field of speculative realism. Donald, would you like to start? Have we evolved to see the truth about reality?
Yes, thank you. I'll start with Michael Watson. He was a great cook, but he had an unusual advantage. Everything that he tasted with his tongue, he also felt as a three-dimensional object with his hands. So mint felt like a tall, cold, smooth column of glass. He could use his hands in 3 dimensions to feel around the glass. He could feel the weight of it, the texture, the temperature of it. Angostura bitters felt like a basket of ivy. He could feel the tendrils, the leaves, all the sponginess of it. Every taste had a unique 3-dimensional shape. And as a result, he was, in fact, a really good cook. He was able to use this extra dimension of objects to create sauces that were very nuanced and tasty. Now, we look at that and we say, well, you know, of course those objects aren't real, but they were certainly useful to him. And about 4% of humans have synesthesia. Michael Watson's was one example of synesthesia. And in each case, there's something useful about their unusual sensory abilities. We don't think that they're seeing reality, but we think that they're seeing or experiencing something that's very, very useful. And we would normally say on evolutionary grounds that in the normal case, evolution would shape our senses to show us the truth, because seeing the truth will make you more fit. But it turns out we don't have to wave our hands and guess what evolutionary theory might say on this. Evolutionary theory is a mathematically precise theory. We have evolutionary game theory, which precisely says what we mean by natural selection. And so in simulations with my graduate students and then mathematical theorems with my mathematical colleagues, Chetan Prakash, we've actually found that it's a theorem of evolution by natural selection. Not just a wish, but a theorem that the probability is 0, that the sensory systems of any creature, human or otherwise, will ever evolve so that the structures of their perceptions, the objects and colors and whatever else they perceive, the structures of the perceptions will never reflect the true structures of objective reality. And so we're faced with an interesting dilemma. I mean, clearly evolution has shaped us with perceptions that are useful, but apparently they're not, if we take evolutionary theory in its current form, probability is 0 that our perceptions tell us the truth. And so as a result, I think about evolution giving us a user interface. It hides the truth. It gives us like a virtual reality that lets us play the game of life, but without actually showing us what objective reality is. If you had to see reality, you couldn't actually play the game. If you had to toggle voltages in a computer, you would lose to someone who actually had a user interface that could play the game more easily.
Thank you, Donald. Graham, have we evolved to see the truth about reality?
I think there's a lot to be said about the way in which evolution has channeled us away from this truth, although I don't think this is necessarily solely the workings of evolution. So if we imagine as a thought experiment that creationism were true and God simply created all current life forms on the spot, I think there would still be a problem. The problem is the assumption that there's something out in the world that we can extract from the world and bring into our mind without any transformation along the way. This comes back to this idea, a very common idea with roots in ancient times, of matter. Matter is a neutral substratum that forms are in, so that we simply extract them from the forms and bring them into our mind, unaltered or not very much altered. I think there's no way to do that. There's no way to translate a form from one place to the other without changing it very much. And of course, evolution, and also not just evolution, but the obvious differences between animal species gives us a lot of evidence of that. The fact that certain animals can see ultraviolet or infrared light, the fact that octopus can now, recently it was discovered an octopus can taste with its tentacles. The animal kingdom has legion examples of this. As for objects, I want to say something about objects, since I'm associated with object-oriented ontology. And if some of you have read Donald's work, you'll know that he sees objects as fictions. I actually agree with what he's saying, that there's no reason to think that that there's anything in the world that resembles in any way the things we call apples and pyramids and horses and these sorts of things. But I do think we need some sort of individuation in reality, because otherwise you're either starting with this monistic lump or you're starting with a continuum that then somehow gets broken up by human perception or animal perception into individuals. And you hear theories like that in which it's the human mind that breaks this primal continuum up into pieces, but then how is the mind different enough from that continuum to be able to do that in the first place? So I think you have to allow for some prior individuation in reality. It just might not have anything like a resemblance with the things that we experience.
When you say individuation, do you mean that there are separate things, they just may not be the way that we perceive them? Is that right?
Yes, I think there has to be separate things, since there's no way otherwise to make the passage from either an inarticulate lump or some kind of continuum with various intensities to get from that to the individual things we perceive. There has to be some prior individuation of entities in reality itself. Although I don't think it has to bear any resemblance to what we experience.
Mazviita, what do you think? Have we evolved to see the truth about reality?
I'm going to tentatively answer yes, but it depends what you mean by seeing the truth about reality. So I just want to unpack this notion. I think what's normally meant by this is a bunch of metaphors, like that there's an unvarnished reality, which is the truth, or that we're taking things in as they really are. And the ultimate version of this is a God's eye view. So, for example, Isaac Newton believed that everything is immediately present to God, as if all of space were the sensory organ of God. In the Optics, Newton describes God as a being who, to quote, sees the things themselves intimately and thoroughly perceives them and comprehends them wholly by their immediate presence to himself. So if this is our benchmark for seeing the truth about reality, it's just obvious that we can't reach it. And you don't need to refer to evolution to realize that. Just in virtue of human beings being creatures with finite minds and finite sensory organs, whose sensory organs are in a tiny bit of space, they're not in all of space, like the sensory organ of Newton's God. So it can't be possible that we immediately perceive the whole world. Our take on the world will always be from a certain perspective, from our tiny corner of space. It can't be the view from nowhere of Newton's God. But this notion of seeing the truth about reality, we should definitely scrutinize it. What the notion assumes is that to see the truth means to see something independently of a perspective. And secondly, to see the properties the thing has by itself and not how the thing relates to us. But the properties a thing has in relation to humans can be just as real as anything. So color gives us a nice example of this point, and this is the view that I spelled out in my book Outside Color. So if we consider questions like, are colors real? When we perceive an object as colored, for example, a lemon is yellow, are we getting the truth about reality? If we take those questions to mean, are colors properties that objects have independently of human perception, then we have to deny the reality of color because of all this evidence that color categorizations are idiosyncratic to humans, as Graham and Donald just alluded to. So how we should think of this is that perceiving an object of yellow is due to this interaction between the human visual system and objects that we refer to as the lemon and the light around it. So it's perfectly viable to treat colors as perceiver-dependent properties. That is to say that they are relational properties, like the property of being a sibling. So, being a sibling depends on how you relate to other human beings, but the fact of you being a brother or sister to someone is just as real a fact as anything else. So likewise, we can say that a lemon's being yellow depends on how it relates to human perceivers. So we can grant real status to perceiver-related properties like color, and therefore we could say that we do see reality. We just have to remember that we're not seeing some version of this God's eye view, which I've just argued is an unreachable ideal and the wrong way to think about human knowledge.
Thank you. Can we describe this thing we call reality? And when we do, can we actually uncover the truth about these things? Graham, do you want to start us off on this?
Sure. One thing I think we've seen is that all...
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below, or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.